Hey everybody, Ty here with a tropical outlook. It's been a week since the last one, so we're right on schedule, but this one might run long, I can't lie to you. There's an awful lot going on. You can kind of look at the satellite and see it. We have a monster hurricane in Humberto now. This is actually a category 4 that's going to be flirting with being on like right at the edge of maybe category 5 status. And it's going to make a close pass to Bermuda here from the looks of it as well. So anyone that might be somehow watching from Bermuda right now, definitely need to be on your guard. This is definitely going to at least make its impacts felt in some way or another. A direct landfall isn't out of the question, but it's uncertain at this time. Then we have our other feature over here. This was previously Invest 94L or PTC9. As you can see now, this is fully tropical at this point, so now we have Tropical Depression 9, which is almost certainly going to become our next named storm in Imelda. Also, if you've seen the last couple days of videos here, I want to apologize for the poor pronunciation on my part. It's just sometimes how it goes. But anyway, moving forward from that, it's really future Imelda here that we're really going to be watching, in particular over towards the lower 48 as well. We're going to go over both of these, of course, but Imelda actually poses a genuine concern to those of us over here in the eastern half of the U.S., especially over towards the Carolina coast. So we'll be talking in detail with that, and then just really kind of taking a look more or less at what's beyond this point here. So there have been some interesting scenarios, I will say also, in regards to Imelda, due to the fact that we have the major hurricane that we have over here in Humberto, and there's also a trough over here. If you look closely on that second screen here, this has been causing shower and thunderstorm activity, but it's going to help alter the steering of Imelda. But with this, timing is going to be everything. It's going to be one of those situations where we're really not going to have the full scope of what to expect here, maybe until the beginning of next week, which really doesn't leave a lot of time to prepare. And then the real threat, I in my personal opinion, I think is really going to be rainfall with future Imelda here. So let's go ahead and actually zoom in here so we can get a good look at our tracks here for both of these systems. So obviously the one on the left, that is Imelda, or I should say Imelda to be. You can see that on satellite it's getting much better organized. It's past Hispaniola and Cuba at this point, so now we're over open waters. We know this area has very warm waters, and we'll go over the details with that in just a little bit. But notice that if you were to take a look at the tracking here, it looks like at one point it kind of stalls out here. That is due to the trough that we have here, but it's also going to be stuck in between Humberto and there's been talk about Fujiwara effect coming into play, where these two storms could potentially merge or even kind of circulate around each other until one of the two wins it out in a battle. Which obviously at this point I would say Humberto would win that battle, because this storm is not going to, it's pretty much going to be a peon compared to what Humberto is. Thankfully that's not coming to the US. But either way though, there's quite a few interesting scenarios coming into play with this. So a lot of uncertainty with this tracking here because of the fact that we're pretty much stuck in between two systems. We are kind of trending in the right direction, because from what I was seeing yesterday, a lot more models were favoring a potential landfall over towards the South Carolina and North Carolina coast here. I'm seeing a little bit less of that today. But even so, we still have to be very careful, because due to the unpredictability of the setup that we have in play here and what to expect over the coming days, this could easily change. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the pathing here. Here's a closer look at it on satellite. Like I said, it's not the most impressive looking storm, but you can see it getting better organized. You can see some low level spin starting to come up here now. So it's showing signs of growth here. And then again, as we mentioned before, here is the official forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center. This is anticipated to become a tropical storm, maybe even by later this afternoon. Would not surprise me in the slightest if it gets the name Imelda. But again, this is where things really get messy, is once we get towards Monday evening, regardless of whether this strengthens up to a hurricane or not, or does make a direct impact here, this is going to bring a lot of tropical moisture onshore here. And the closer it gets to land, the more moisture we will have to deal with. And a lot of these areas were unfortunately impacted by Hurricane Helene last year, which is kind of a nerve-wracking situation to talk about because the flooding over here towards the Carolinas particularly was very significant. There's also high wind. There was also damage from high winds, tornadoes, etc. from this as well. If this track were to play out here, as it is right now, we would still get the heavy rain, unfortunately. Not so much of the wind, but it would still be a bit of a problem. And like I said before, this does look like it really slows down between Tuesday and Wednesday and doesn't make much in the way of progress. And even then, it still doesn't look like we're fully done with it yet by the time we get into Thursday. So it could be a multi-day rain event, and that's where things get really concerning, is because with tropical systems, the downpours are usually much more intense than your garden variety thunderstorms here. So we do need to be very aware here, both not just in the coastline, but inland as well. You're still going to get the surf. You're still going to get the rip currents from this as well. So either way, we are going to get some kind of impact from this. It's pretty clear to me at this point. So, of course, we'll be doing extensive coverage on this over the coming days and probably the rest of the week, possibly as well. So be prepared for that. Make sure you have the like button on and also the notification bell to go with that. So now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and take a look at the pathing for Hurricane Humberto, because again, this isn't completely to a point where I would say that this is going to make a direct landfall to Bermuda, but it's going to come very close. This tiny little blue speck right here, this lighter shade of blue, is where Bermuda is, and of course this storm here is an absolute beast. Look at it on satellite. This is a classic hurricane that you think hurricane structure that you would think of here. It's got the iconic buzzsaw look here. I do think that there is a small chance that this does make its way all the way up to category 5 even. It's going to be very close because the max that you would see from the National Hurricane Center as far as wind speeds for category 4 is 155 miles an hour. It is expected to meet that threshold. If it were to go 1 or 2 miles per hour above that, then we're at category 5 status. So it's going to be close at this point. Again, though, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the forecast track, you can see that Bermuda is barely inside that cone. So I'm thinking for the most part, you should be okay. Because, you're just barely on the line here at this point. But if there's any push back out towards the east here, then we're looking at a slightly different scenario. But even then, that close pass is going to cause problems. It's going to be a lot of wind on this particularly. Wind impact from this particularly if you're in Bermuda, mainly due to the fact that you're going to be on the right side of the storm here. The right side is often the side that has the stronger winds and some of the more nasty impacts. So just because we're not getting a direct impact or landfall here doesn't mean that impacts will not be felt. So still need to be prepared, but at least the worst case scenario as of right now doesn't seem to be occurring. Of course, we'll have to see how things progress from that point onward. Now again, we'll do this also for Tropical Depression 9. But if you were to look at the spaghetti models for the intensity here, there are a few that push it to category 5, but the general consensus has it right on the edge. And I think max category 4 probably is going to be the final verdict here, but we'll of course see how things progress throughout the next really 24 to 48 hours, because that's when I think it would reach its max intensity. As we get closer towards Bermuda, I do think it might start to weaken, which could ultimately alter the track as well. So like I said, there's a lot of moving parts with both of these systems, a lot of complications to be had with this. So again, go back to Tropical Depression 9 here, and we'll look at the spaghetti models. And what I've noticed is we're pretty confident this becomes a hurricane. It doesn't really make it to anything more significant. There may be 1 or 2 of these spaghetti models at best that bring it right up to category 3 status. A lot of them don't even really push it to category 2 though. So have pretty good confidence that due to the wind shear that would come into play from that trough that's off to its west, and also being caught on the outflow of Humberto, it's going to help limit the ceiling for this storm here, which is honestly a good thing. As I've said before in previous videos, any storms that form closer to home might pose a greater threat, and that's pretty common for this time of year. We're past peak season, And usually once we get past this point, anything that forms further out to sea usually gets turned out to sea. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the exact winds could be with this based off of one of my favorite models to look at. This is the HWRF model. And at this point, we are looking at Humberto. And if we were to go ahead and put this in motion, you can see that some of these models still favor becoming close to category 5 here. But again, the main thing to make note of here is the impact towards Bermuda. There does not look to be a direct landfall at this point, which is probably the best news of all, regardless of its strength at this point. You can also get a little bit of a view of soon to be Imelda. Now, see, again, look at that. Look at how it starts to freeze up over there, and then eventually it starts to look like it wants to take a turn out to sea. This is going to probably be the biggest headache in regard to forecasting with this one, due to the fact that, simply put, any small subtlety, any change in that trough, if it were to push a little further to the east a little bit quicker, we would end up either seeing that turn happen a little faster, or would end up kind of canceling everything out, and this either the storm doesn't even develop, or there's a chance that it would help encourage it to make a landfall. So it's gonna be probably a day-by-day process to figure out just what exactly we could be dealing with here. So again, I urge you to be patient with any meteorologist, whether it's a weather YouTuber like myself or the professionals. This is going to be a little bit more of a hair trigger type situation. So another thing I'm going to take a look at here, and this is of course an important detail in all of this, is the sea surface temperatures. So if I were to move this forward here, what I want you to make note of, and we should again be very thankful that we don't have that we have the trough over here in the lower 48. It's because the water out here is absolutely perfect for tropical development. Nearly 90 degrees surface temperatures, some areas probably even hotter than 90 degrees at this point. It's going to really create for an environment that will be more than habitable for tropical development. Had that trough not been in the way, we would be in a situation in which this storm would strengthen rather quickly. Rapid intensification would probably be likely at that point. There's going to be dry air as a result of that trough as well that's going to come in, and I think that's truly going to be the biggest limiting factor with this. So with that in mind, at least we can be confident in saying that a major hurricane impact doesn't seem likely at this time. Now, of course, as we know, things could change. We still don't really know what it's going to do as we get past that 5-day mark, because it still looks like it just lingers offshore here. It's not impossible for these storms to kind of loop back around. Will I think it would have the same vigor as what it could have as we make its close approach to land here? Jury's still out on that, but nothing should be off the table just yet. We really just don't know. And then regards to the moisture content, and we're going to be pretty much looking at the precipitable water that's going to be available, and this is going to be the main threat behind our rainfall potential here. If we were to go ahead and move this loop here a little bit, watch how this content really picks up as it draws closer to land here. These lower values are the ones in the brown here. Once you get to the higher values, that usually is very indicative of heavy moisture available here. Once you start getting into the blues and the purples here, that's when we have a lot of water in the atmosphere, and these tropical systems are going to just essentially wring that out like a sponge over towards the coastline here. And we're doing this in millimeters. I'm sorry that this feature isn't shown in inches like we're used to over here, but to put it in perspective for you, about 70 millimeters worth of water is a lot, to put it lightly. I'm going to try to put the calculated, or the I'm going to do like a conversion equation on the screen here, so that way you can put that in a calculator and get the exact value. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, and I apologize for that, but that just goes to show just exactly what we could be dealing with in regards to our precip here. If we were to look at the accumulated total, this is in inches over here. The closer this gets towards land, the more intense the precipitation, but you can easily see about half a foot of rain is possible, even with it staying offshore here. So Like I said, if you're in the coastline or even further inland from there, about maybe 20 to 30 miles, you still need to watch this closely. Just because we aren't getting a direct landfall here does not mean that we won't see any notable impacts. And remember, this is going to be hanging around for a minute, so this could last for days. So, really, really interesting situation coming into play here. Here's a closer look at that trough right here. This, of course, will also have its own shower and thunderstorm activity, which could maybe even enhance the rainfall, possibly, depending on the timing in which we have this pan out. There you see Imelda coming up right there. And like I said, this just really makes for a messy situation, not just with forecasting, but just in general, the rainfall. Some areas could have enhanced rainfall over towards the coastline as a result of this, and even inland. So, very difficult situation to forecast here. Again, as I've mentioned before, I can't really understate that enough. So let's go ahead now, since we've talked about those two systems and just what we have to work with in the short term here, let's go ahead and look beyond that point. Now, again, as I mentioned before, that wind shear is going to help keep the storm weak. And then from that point onward, main development region still looks like it's pretty open at this point, but I'm really interested in seeing what could lie ahead here for these areas around the Caribbean, the Gulf here. Looks like due to the increased activity with the weather pattern here, it does look like wind shear around the Gulf is going to be keeping things on the down low. It's kind of going to be lockdown season there. But if we were to go ahead and take a look at the Caribbean, it still looks like it could be open for business. We'll have to see what the dry air will have to do with that also to help either encourage or omit development there as well. If we were to go ahead and look at the ensemble members here, because I don't want to make this into like a 50-minute video, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of skip actually. I might actually skip the dry air content for now, because I haven't really seen much of a signal in the long range as of yet for anything over towards the Caribbean and Gulf. I do think that the main development region might have a couple more named storms within it. It's possible at this point, but again, as I mentioned before, during this time of year, these storms will often end up being turned out to sea much quicker than normal due to the ridge actually starting to amplify over here towards the North Atlantic, and this just, as you can see, it just pulls these storms out to sea without any chance of really impacting land, which is kind of what we want, truthfully. So last but not least here, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our ensemble members. Here are those other potential storms that we could be looking at over the next 10 days here. But really, the biggest headache is going to be really dealing with what Imelda decides to do here. Because if we let this loop run back, here's Humberto, here's Imelda, you can see that there's still a decent split of models here that do bring it into land. So, like I said, this one's going to be one where a lot of the weather enthusiasts, meteorologists alike, are going to be pulling their hair out in the short term. And pretty much all the way up until maybe its close approach or even landfall at this point. So it's going to be touch and go here, so I urge you to stay tuned for further updates. Make sure that you have the notification bell on. Make sure you hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed already, definitely recommend that you do so, because we will be making updates on this pretty frequently, maybe even twice a day at this point. But until probably tomorrow, may have a short up this evening, I will see you later. You guys enjoy your Saturday. It's been Metalhead Weatherman.